Yeah, g'day, Rod. It's Wade Northhouse here, everybody from Billboard Battalion. We're coming to you live from Coyuga in north central Victoria, Australia, here on the 21st, Monday, the 21st of April 2025. And in line up with our interviews that we're doing with candidates for the next federal election, and also a few other people that are coming in as well to talk on different things, politics. We have here tonight, very much appreciate the leader of the Great Australian Party, Mr. Rod Culleton here from Western Australia. And Rod's been gracious enough to get on with us tonight and have a bit of a yarn about what he's up to, what he's done in the past, what his party's about, why he's here, and possibly even touch on a few of the things that are happening with regard to all the different freedom candidates and parties and so on, if we can get enough time to cover all that stuff. So, a big welcome to you tonight, Rod, from Western Australia. How you going over there, mate? And how's everything happening? And what have what's your sort of purpose for standing this coming election as a West Australian senator? Just a little bit of information on that, Rod, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Wade, and thanks for inviting me on your podcast. And I understand we're going live, but we're also coming live from Bullsbrook in West Australia from GAP headquarters, which is in the coach. Look, we're actively out campaigning. It has been a little bit difficult in this election. I have a broken leg, but I'm able to crutch around and still do these lives. And I do believe this election is going to be won through what we can do on social media. So I appreciate you giving the time and the opportunity for us to come and actually have a chat about it. Look, I just want to basically finish off, I guess, in my own opinion, the legacy that was left in my time as a federal senator. Not too many people ever get to go to the High Court of Parliament. I've done that. I was given the tools, and the tools clearly, when applying the law at the legislature level, which is having a complete understanding of your history of your country, I've been able to bring that back down into the judiciary and get some major wins. So our ethos is to carry on the policies and the integrity and for the restoration of the Commonwealth, bringing the rights back to the people. And that's the purpose why I'm running again, with a couple in the Senate and one in the lower house in Western Australia, Dawn Kelly, who's doing a remarkable job for Hasluck, in order to have a presentation on the podium in Canberra.
Well done, mate. So you've said that you're nursing a broken leg at the minute. I think that I think you might have described yourself at different things I've seen and when I've met with you as a country boy. And I think that it doesn't get any more to show, the toughness of the Australian country people, in particular in the agricultural industry, to be nursing a broken leg or whatever injury you've got there, and still be out just every day doing your work and doing what you need to, and not sitting at home in a chair or in bed going, oh, woe's me. So I think that gives us a bit of an idea of the character and the strength of you yourself as a country bloke. And I think that it's interesting to know that you've done this race before. You've been in the Senate before. You've had some very, very colourful and highlight kind of things happen in your career in the Senate as a senator. So you might just fill us in with a couple of the highlights for a start of the things that happen in your very easygoing career as a senator, with no hassles and no hiccups and no problems and dramas. It was smooth sailing all the way. I can see that. So you might just fill us in with a little bit of that sort of stuff, Rod.
Well, I guess if I was to challenge a Sydney to Hobart yacht race, I think I'd contend pretty well, considering my spinnaker may be torn, or someone may sabotage my spinnaker and break the mast. But look, I don't profess to be a hero. I guess we were only given pretty well much 8 weeks to campaign. My commitment is to go out as party leader and to give true representations for the people of West Australia. I was actually driving the coach 2 days after the operation. Look, it was uncomfortable, but I think when you have a serious bone injury, the more you can move it and push it past the threshold, the better you are for better healing. And it was amazing. I went back to the specialist and he said to me, "Gee, your legs come on. You can pretty much get yourself on a bike." He said, "Have you been keeping up the physio?" I said, "Yes, absolutely." But I didn't want to tell him I was driving a coach. And look, at times with my live streams, I was busting out in a serious sweat because I'd given away the heavy painkillers. So you can imagine trying to contend with that. But obviously, I wouldn't be able to drive a heavy vehicle, certainly the coach, if I was on painkillers. So I've done everything sensibly. But in actual fact, I'm not nursing it now. I'm nurturing it. So I've actually given the crutches the flick, and I'm actually trying to bounce around as best I can, and I'm pretty much putting Rolf Harris to shame at the moment. But look, the second part of your question is how we. I may have forgotten what the second part of your question was. There, can you hit me with that again?
So I was just wanted to give people like you've had a run in the Senate before, and it was pretty nasty stuff that you faced, Rod. And I just wanted to give people or give you an opportunity to say why you copped such a hard time. And if I understand it correctly, it's because you called out the corruption and the dishonesty and the law breaking, and what happened to you for your actually standing up for the Australian people and actually telling the truth and saying what was correct and what was wrong with things. So, a little bit possibly about what you had to deal with and why.
Well, look, I was given a set of tools when I went into Parliament, and one of those tools, which is the operating manual for the Commonwealth Office. So when I take a contract through an oath or an affirmation, as every law officer has to do, because the senator is an officer of his own office, and that's my contract. And then I'm given the keys to operate the powers of that office. And if I abuse those powers, well, obviously I'm subject to some serial criminal, look, you can be subject to criminal offences. I mean, there's a strict compliance. But what has, like as a senator, and I would never have picked this. Pauline Hanson gave me the portfolio of writing the Royal Commission, and I wrote the terms and reference to the Royal Commission into the banking and financial, which had reverberating effects right around not only Australia but the world, in fact. But when I was writing those Royal Commissions, because it does say it has to be empowered, and because I'm an inventor, I invented Grain Keg, and I'm listed on IP Australia. Section 1A of the Royal Commission Act of 1902, 1903, I'm pretty sure it's 1902, says the executive power must come through the monarchy of the United Kingdom and under the Commonwealth. And that's where I spotted it. I spotted there had been a departure because I understand concepts as an inventor. So I'm not trying to be an Aussie hero here. I mean, farmers do problem solve, and I problem solved, and I approached Pauline Hanson, I approached the Attorney General, and I approached Malcolm Turnbull. And when I presented the Royal Commission terms of reference to Malcolm Turnbull, he said, "Thank you." And I said, "Well, Malcolm, there is a conundrum." And he said, "What's the conundrum, Senator Culleton?" I said, "Well, the executive power comes through the Prime Minister. Is that correct?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "You can cut the umbilical cord. You have the final say on whether the Royal Commission goes ahead." He said, "Absolutely." And that's why he was coming out and saying, "We're not having a Royal Commission. We're not having a Royal Commission." I said, "But the conundrum is you can only have that power if you're the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia, not the Australian government." That's when the bombshell went off, and Pauline Hanson said, "Well, we're not having a Royal Commission. We're going to have a Senate inquiry." I said, "No, Pauline, you gave me a commitment to go out to my constituents that we had a Royal Commission because there was many farmers who were subject to the effects of the abuse and unlawful process of our private banks in this country." And that really weighed heavily on me. And when we did the Paul Murray Live, when I went down to what they call Old Parliament House, I had this eerie feeling over me, and this voice came into my head and said, Rodney, you're sitting in the Commonwealth Parliament. It's unfortunate the Australian people have abandoned it. So look, it is not Old Parliament House. It is the Commonwealth Parliament of Australia. It is in Commonwealth jurisdiction. It is the forum and the body politic to give all the Australian people the rights. The one up the hill will only give them privileges. And this is what I said in the Liz Gunn interview today. You know, we as all Australians have the rights to all the extractable industries and primary industries and whatever we export or sell as commodities overseas to the rest of the world internationally and in effect domestically, that we are the benefactors of the royalties, and we're not getting that because we have an administration that runs under an alternative power that has no power at all. And I always call Australia Little China because communism is very alive in our Australian government, and there is no question about that. I don't make that claim; the law makes the claim.
So
alternatively, I was punished. I was politically assassinated. I was never thrown from Parliament. I was prevented from returning.
So, and that's sort of what I wanted to get at tonight, Rod. But a little bit of history to give people the idea. You started the Gap Party, and back then I think you were part of One Nation at that time. So you started the Gap Party and seem to be doing a hell of a lot more than many of the just come in under the banner of another party or something or other, and then they take their pension, their money when they're finished and go. It seems to me that and I've heard you speak a few times. I've met with you a few times, and so on. It seems to me that you're not just a fly-by-nighter. It seems to me that you're, putting your money where your mouth is, putting your body on the line, putting your life and time on the line, and to go ahead and start your own party and now have candidates that are standing in other states as well as yourself. I think that's pretty enormous in the political climate and the situation, going up against the level of corruption, the level of sellout from our government, and how foreign interests and powers now basically control our country. So do you talk much about the likes of the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and the United Nations? A lot of the stuff that you talk about is how Australia's constitution has been abandoned. Things aren't happening under the constitution like they should, and so on. So what's your opinion on how well our country's travelling in terms of our government representing the Australian people, or whether or not we're being basically controlled from overseas, and our government, in particular, the four major parties, and we give it to the four major parties all the time. Are they actually doing the right thing? Are they looking after our country, or are they working for somebody else? And the Australian people have to rely on small parties such as yourself and possibly some middle to right-wing independents to run the place properly and get it back on track.
Well, the short answer, that's a very long question, I might add, but the short answer to that is the intention of the Australian voter is being deprived at the ballot box.
Yep.
If anyone's to blame, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, I'm just saying as per the law, if one sits on its rights and doesn't exercise its rights and does nothing about it, then you suffer the consequences. Unfortunately, Australia keep voting in the major parties, okay? Yeah. Those major parties have signed up to, net zero, World Health Organization, the WHO, multiple things. We can list them. We all know that. But what can you do about it? The Australian people keep putting in the majors, okay? And it's got to be a time when they have to act on, or certainly err on the side of caution and say, look, we were granted rights and freedoms of this great nation. There is a lot of homeless people around Australia. A lot of people can't afford their mortgages. You know, we're seeing the effects of what the government has done by shutting everyone down in COVID. And we've seen this in agriculture, which I'm sure you're going to brush on later in the interview, where, you know, in the 1990s, our agriculture industry was decimated from 1990 to the early 2000, and that was the demise of the Australian wool industry. And Australia was built on the sheep's back, and obviously the demise of a statutory body called the Australian Wheat Board. Now, they were two major big players in the primary industries, and the majors have done nothing, and certainly the nationals have done nothing to protect the primary producer in Australia. And when I talk primary producer, you know, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of farmers that are probably watching your show, probably vote National and go in for National. I know Nationals were pretty strong in the state election of Western Australia, but what they're not realising is the Nationals have signed up to net zero to get rid of those farmers, certainly by 2030, 4 years down the track, if not 2050, because they're pretty much going to shackle them to where they can't produce, and are supporting legislation that's been passed at a state level where unelected officials can come out onto the property without any experience, look at what they're doing, notice a drum of glyphosate in their chemical shed or spray seed or trifluorine or whatever you want to say, and say you're a risk to the environment, and then relocate that farmer. Pretty much what they did after the GFT for 4,000 farmers just in the landmark loan book itself. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know what it takes to convince the Australian voter or the elector, voter, however you want to call it, because pretty much they're cutting their own throats. And if you don't believe me, go and have a look at the news. I mean, they're all out there proud. I mean, pretty much now everyone is getting on a tractor planting crops, which they use a lot of chemicals in canola and so forth. And yet just around the corner, we're getting net zero environmental issues.
Yep.
You really think they're going to allow spraying to go on in this country? I don't think so under the current regime. So they need to have a good look at themselves. And I don't mean that disrespectful, but wake up, because there will be no family farms by 2050 if we don't step in and do something. And currently I'm stepping in to do something, because I'm actually really allowing Australian farmers to go back home where the police have been telling them they can't, and we're getting through all that barricade, I can tell you.
So just if we have a bit of a quick look at, you know, you've had some successes, and we'll go back to talking about the farming and so on in a minute. But you've had some successes, and this goes back to you know, the mid to early 80s, when I know groups that started set up, for example, Bankwatch here in Victoria and Southern, about banks illegally foreclosing on farms, creating false evidence, lying in court, getting police and sheriffs to throw people off properties, and everything was corrupt and wrong. So now you've had some success just recently in getting farmers back onto their properties, and you know, I think that this is a litmus test. It's an example of to everybody of what you're saying that's correct. And you know, I'd really like to hear, you know, some of the success story that you've had improving what you're saying, not just talking about it, Rod, not just being this or that, and actually, you know, walking the walk and having some terrific successes. So we'd love to hear some of that stuff,
well,
mate.
Okay, well, being the author of the terms and reference to the Royal Commission, and when they prevented me coming back to enter Parliament, that's when Malcolm Turnbull came out and said he'll have a Royal Commission. But what happened is he done it under Queen of Australia, which has no executive power whatsoever. So there has never been a bona fide Royal Commission in this country. In actual fact, since 1973, with what Whitlam did and basically handballed everything to China, you know, we've certainly had Labor allow communist right through our current administration. I won't call them a government, they're administration. So again, I'm not making the claim, the law makes the claim. So let's have a look at the Royal Commission at large. Haynes said the banks only choose to follow the law when they believe they need to do so. Well, straight away there was a recommendation that there be a full inquiry into the Landmark loan book. That never happened. There was a recommendation that the ANZ Bank, which the ANZ Bank's in a lot of trouble. I see Shane Elliott's the next one to go down, and of course we got a lot of farms back at that time in 2015 through the 60-minute program. So with the evidence that I was getting out of the court, because everyone said, "Oh, Culleton, you've been back to court. You know, you're always in court. You're not getting anywhere." Yes, we were, because when you go to war with a bank, they're a very big litigant. They really are. They have a lot of power with the money. They get the best fellows, best lawyers in the country and barristers. So, you know, the equality of arms is not quite even, but you can get them. And we applied the approach of the female mountain duck, you know, where she's got her ducklings and the foxes after them, and you know the drake takes off and she pretends she's going off with a busted wing. Well, that's what we had to do, and in doing that we were able to get all the evidence and be able to compile the mechanics behind the issues of our rural lending and the demise of the Australian Wheat Board. So a lot of it was non-monetary defaults. A lot of it was no valid assignments. A lot of it without the consent of the borrower. So there was, it was a disgrace for the banking industry. And in actual fact, we called out the AMP charging dead people. So even Anna Blight, who came out and said it's a national disgrace over our private banking, but nothing happened to them. So the issue is not so much, it comes down to a simple rule of law. It's at the end of the day, if you have a financial facility or a mortgage with a lender, with a bank or whatever, if they register their legal right on the title, they don't have to go to a court to prove their debt. They pretty much enliven the Transfer of Land Act, raise a default, go for a power of sale, and the Register of Titles is instructed to do the transfer. But if they don't register it, if they don't have a legal right to the assets, so there may have been some prime lending, or, you know, in our case, a lot of the farmers' farms were securitized, so we were actually using our own money, and the Landmark was the service provider. So basically, we encouraged the middleman on, you know, and of course we only get lent 60% of the asset value, so 40%. You know, these financiers took off for that as well. But anyway, let's put that aside. Then they only have an equitable right because they're holding it on behalf of other benefactors, which in actual fact are proven to be the guy that owned the farm, to be honest. So they don't actually have a legal right to the asset. So then they have to go to court and they have to prove their debt. Big deal. So what? You know, the judges all turn around and go, well, you know, you borrowed the money, pay it back. Well, that's okay, but where do we redeem? Where's the redemption when we try to get the so-called mortgagee or the contracting party that lent us the money has claimed you can't pay them because they're only a lender of record? And anyway, the whole thing was completely complicated. And, you know, no one's going to turn around and pay 4 million out to an entity that says you can't pay them, and then turn around and say because if they did take the money, then the law would say, well, you should have known better, Mr. Culleton, you don't go and pay them. And that was our fiduciary duties as directors, as farmers running these companies. So, but what has happened, what I've been able to establish is the torrent system. And the torrent system is the accuracy and integrity of the land title system, not only in West Australia, right across the nation, because they all adopted the torrent title system. And there can be no stain because that affects the state revenue. It affects the taxpayer, and it also affects Treasury because Treasury can't be tainted with a fraud or amnesty. It'd be subject to amnesty if there has been fraud on title. And what these major legal firms have been doing, because they never had a legal right to the asset, they haven't been following proper due process pursuant to what the requirements are under the Civil Judgment Enforcement Act in Western Australia. And pretty much everything's been a bluff to try and get the farmer to consent to walk off the property. But we now know the game that they're playing. And for that reason, the only entity that is stopping us from going home to our farms, because we never sold them, we put everyone on notice they weren't for sale, and is the Register of Titles. Now, we can clearly show fraud on title. They're missing key orders in order to invoke and enact the torrent system in order to be a valid, lawful sale and transfer. And that's where we're going. So I submitted submissions, and we've been applying the test to other current ones where they're trying to send out the toe cutters to farmers, especially up north. And the police aren't now, they're not getting involved. They've now been looking at what I'm saying. And because those guys were liable, the cops were coming out when we, at the time, in retrospect, in 2014, and the Manalini case in 2015, I think, 14 or 15, where we held them off at the front gate. Well, that was notice. Even offered to pay them. They couldn't take the money. And the coppers came in when we were still the legal owner of the property, protected by indefeasibility. The West Australian Police had no orders that it could say that they could touch us. They had no orders to say that they could remove the legal owner. And we had a lawful excuse to protect our assets under feasibility. And that's what we did. So now the train's coming into station. Those individual police officers are going to be held account, because a lot of these farmers were shunned in the local community. And, many of them aren't with us today. And I think that's I think up in the Burdekin at the time, one every week was suiciding, and receivers were going in, shooting their dogs, shooting their cattle, violating their partners. It was game on. And it certainly wasn't Australian. And I guess that's what originally got me to stand with Pauline Hanson. Not that I was over all her policies, but she gave me the portfolio of the Royal Commission and how we could restore honesty, integrity, not only back in with banking, but through our registry of the land titles.
Well, that's a reasonably long answer, and a lot of people may not sort of pick up on all the legal speak and so on and that. But I think the bottom line is to say that you're having some wins in proving that things have been done illegally. You're getting farmers back onto their land. Police are now being made aware that they have no legal right to interfere or become some kind of the muscle, if you like, for what we could describe as the banking mafia. And I know from personal people I've known over many, many years, and even right now we've got people across Australia that are under attack from banks and corporations and all kinds of things like this, where people have been arrested and dragged off and God knows what, and so on. So I think that this could be a turning point. And I think that, we cannot underestimate the work that you and your team have done and are doing. And I know, when you're in that kind of game, there's a lot of people might look down their nose at the sort of things that you're doing and saying. And, you've got the old conspiracy theorist handle and all that kind of thing. But I think the evidence is proving that what you're talking about is correct, Rod.
Well, the evidence, and the evidence is the law.
Yes, and that's simply, what I'm saying, and I know that's what we work on. We work on the truth, the facts, and the evidence. So at the end of the day, I'd just like to say on behalf of everybody, well done to you for those things. And there must be some people around the countryside who are incredibly grateful for getting their places back for the work that you and your team have done. And we certainly do want to see you and your party members back in Parliament.
Okay, let me correct that, Wade. I'm not getting their properties back. I'm not getting their properties back. I'm allowing them to return home. They never lost their properties. It's been the West Australian Police or the police in general, and I know certain cases in Queensland, they never lost the property. They were still the legal owner, and the police have prevented them from returning home to their house, to their castle. I mean, everyone in Australia's dream is to own their own home, whether it be on rural land or residential here in any capital city right around Australia. The dream is to own your own home. Well, you know, this has got to stop. And I don't say everyone's perfect. Don't get me wrong. There are people that have bitten off more than they can chew. But, you know, we were able to really, work with Bob Catter at the time to get forbearance to stop a lot of the foreclosures and change the attitude of the banking. But what happens is they let a bit of time go past, and then they get back to their old habits again. And that's what we can't allow to happen. And that's why we're now, you know, keeping the blowtorch on the one spot so that, you know, we can, you know, make sure that we bend the metal.
And I think after the Banking Royal Commission, certain things happened then and recommendations and so on. And I think a lot of people said, well, look, they'll give it a couple of years where they'll lay low and then they'll start getting back to their old habits. And from what I hear, that is the situation. So, and it'd be interesting to touch. We probably won't have a time tonight, but it will be interesting to touch base with you on people, for example, in New South Wales and Queensland right now who are having what I would assume would be property invasions with regard to the baiting of fire ants that don't even exist. So, you know, there's a lot happening in that space where the people are trespassing, whether they have the right. And at the end of the day, you've got inspectors or sprayers or contractors turning up. And if you look at it in just raw terms, with people with guns who are giving them access and keeping landholders at bay, and power of arrest and weapons and the whole lot of it. So there's a lot going on there. You talked about the agricultural thing before. That's happening through two states. You know, we've had the destruction of huge numbers of beehives under the rubbish about these massive varroa mite infestations. They're murdering bees everywhere. They've been murdering chooks by the numbers, creating false flags and so on about avian bird flu and whatever. So we're seeing farmers under attack on many situations. And over in Western Australia, and I talk a lot about the wind up of the red meat industry, but we've seen in WA the shutting down of the export of the live sheep trade on ships from the federal government, which, in my opinion, you know, you mentioned the Nationals there before. My opinion is the Nationals are Labor. It doesn't matter because they're dancing to the tune of international terrorist organisations like the WWF and so on. So what are your thoughts about the West Australian sheep trade being shut down? That's right in your home backyard there, Rod.
Well, it's not shut down, and I tell you how it works, right? And look, to me, and I don't want to be disrespectful to the message that's been put out there. The message out there is keep the sheep. The government is not getting rid of sheep, so it is the wrong message. Then they turn around and the Nationals tell them, look, we got to go and protest. So they come into the city of Perth and they protest. Trucks up the highway, that's fine, but get your ducks in a row because it's not a state issue. If you're going to have a protest, it's a federal issue. So you would have South Australia, you would have Melbourne, you'd have Queensland, you'd have Sydney, all collectively doing a political protest. But let me tell you, protests go nowhere anymore because under their law, they don't have to acknowledge a protest. Now, let me make it very clear so that people understand how this all plays out. So what happens is Murray Watts, which I said to Liz Gunn today was in the parliament when I was there. He was a political advisor for Anna Blight, who's now the chief of the banking organisation. And Murray was a lawyer, but I can tell you right now, he wouldn't know which end of a sheep ate grass. And he was not a good agriculture minister because he had no idea on how to live in the bush. And that's not being disrespectful, that's a fact. So what happens is Murray Watts is the Australian government. So he's going to try and shut down a trade. Well, Section 51(1) of the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act says that they cannot place a prohibition against a right, which is trade. So I got former Senator Harris and former Senator Bob Day, and I put what they call a quo warranto on Murray Watts to say, where does he gain the authority to override Section 51(1) or place a prohibition like a stop on live sheep trade when it's a right out of our country to deal internationally? He was sacked as Agriculture Minister Monday morning, and we served it on him on Friday afternoon. Okay, so that's the power of the knowledge of legislature, which is what I did. But let's have a look how they bluff the farmers. So all of a sudden, we got these peak bodies called West Australian Farmers Federation, John Hassel, all these guys that would be if they want to be. We'd like to have a crack being a national, all run for politics, state and federal. And then we got Tony Seabrook at the Pastorals and Graziers Association. Maybe it's the other way around. I don't know, because I don't know too many members of them. But what happens is the government then place an unelected panel. Okay, they're not elected, they're not qualified. They're like Murray Watts. They don't know which end eats grass, but they go out there merely to contract with the voice, the mouthpieces, and they bring the ABC, and then they say we're going to have a meeting down at Katanning, and we're going to have another meeting, a growers meeting up at Muresk. But what growers don't realise is these peak bodies start bouncing their mouths and contract with a panel that has no statutory power at law. So they're consenting, getting into contracting, and then all of a sudden wonder why their industry goes under the bus. Because the ABC report on it, that's public notice. So if the growers are allowing these peak bodies to represent them and be the mouthpieces at these seminars or meetings or whatever, then they are contracting with an entity that they believe has the power to shut down their live sheep trade when it doesn't. So they're consenting to it to go. And I don't know how much I have to keep emphasizing that. And I hope a lot of your farmers are watching through your network, but start to have a look, because Section 50, go and look it up, Section 51(1) of the Constitution. And remember, a stream cannot rise above its source, right? So Murray Watts can't override the law, can't place a prohibition on the right to trade. Now, those wethers get dropped on Crown land, get loaded on Crown land, go out on Commonwealth Highway, they don't go over state, and then go all the way down to the port. State can't get involved, so that's why it's a federal matter. But if those sheep are not labouring with an infectious disease, Australian government has no jurisdiction to place a prohibition, because the government can only regulate. They can't create a prohibition. So the Australian farmer, especially in West Australia, their live sheep trade cannot at law be shut down, okay? But when you keep going out and saying keep the sheep and selling all these ornaments and whatever, you're consenting to your trade to fall away by consent. And people need to come back and realise and view it through the eyes of the law, and look up the law and stand on your rights. You cannot shut down a trade. Because if you're going to shut down a commerce and trade, get rid of your banks, get rid of all these other, get rid of exporting iron ore to China. Get rid of it all. Because if you're going to shut down the trade of primary industry, shut it right down. And shut down coal. Same thing.
Yep. So, I mean, we've touched on a few things here. We could do an interview every day for the next week and still not cover everything. But I think it's very important to hear this crucial stuff because, so many people just listen to the likes of the National Farmers Federation who, are totally and absolutely just abhorrent, I believe. In fact, they're not representing our farmers. They're helping to throw our farmers to the sharks. So, we certainly need to hear more information such as you're talking about. So, so real people get the idea of what the hell's happening and what's going on and what their rights actually are.
Okay, well, hang on a minute. So you were saying fire ants. Is that what you said before? Okay.
Yeah.
So someone comes to your property. What do they do when they come to the property? What's happening? Tell me.
Well, as far as I believe that inspectors or sprayers or whatever it is, bait layers, are coming to a property and saying, we're here to lay baits to poison fire ants. I'm not sure whether they're saying, yes, you've got them, or no, we've had a report, there's some there, or we've found some. I don't know what the hell's going on. But we see footage of police then turning up and forcing access and keeping the landowners at bay, as I understand, under threat of arrest or so on. In fact, we've seen a landowner arrested while these people are doing this. So that's basically what I understand to be the situation.
Okay, well, understanding is not a fact, but let's have so if I was to ask you this question, the whoever's coming to the property, right, are they making a claim?
So I am not sure. I'm just
no, but just
throwing
answer the question. Are they making a claim? Are they making a claim that they believe there are fire ants on the property? Are they making that claim?
I do not know. I'm just throwing this up as something that I've seen. I've heard people talk about it. So if you want to get into the specifics, I can't exactly tell you that because I'm not there on the ground and I can't speak to it.
What do you say the inference is? What do you say it appears to be?
So I say the inference is that it appears to be that they're claiming that there are fire ants on the property.
Okay, so there's a strong inference that they are making a claim.
That is what I would believe to be the situation.
They who make the claim must prove. So let's say if I had a property and some so-called officer came and made a claim, I would say, well, can you substantiate that claim? And they go, well, we believe. Well, that's a belief. That's not a fact. So all this stuff that's happening, because what people have to understand, well, I'm not quite sure which, I think it's section 58 of the Transfer of Land Act, and I'm sure it'll be different sections in different states because we're under the torrent system, so everyone has the Transfer of Land Act. Is indefeasibility. So property rights are so paramount, although we are losing them by going to digital titles, but that's another issue. But for the sake of this argument, or not argument, just addressing your question, is that indefeasibility protects an original proprietor against any other third-party claim, okay? Unless that claim is registered on the title. So if they come in and say that there's fire ants, they need to register the claim on the title. Now, in order to bust through that, would be breaking and entering. And I did see a short video where a police officer was pulling or broke into, or whatever. Well, she's in a lot of trouble because the police don't have power. And not only that, where's the crime? Fire ants aren't a crime. What are the police doing there? And we have to then test the authority of these people that want to go around with a pressure bottle and just pretty much aim it aimlessly anywhere. So to me, they are not permitted on the property, and that is apparent. They can be done for trespass and damages. That's how I see it. And this is where the police cannot involve themselves in a civil matter. If there's no crime, but I understand if the people don't ask them to leave, then they're not trespassing. You've got to ask them to leave and then say, don't ever, you or any other agent acting for principal in the capacity of blah, 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 you are never permitted entry to this property again until you can register your claim on the title to say that is a fact, here it is. And not only that, even if there was some detection, then you would have to say you would work with the landowner sensibly. You don't have to bust gates, and especially on an organic farm, taking consideration you're giving away 20 years of organic certification. Who has the right to come and destroy someone like that? No one.
Absolutely.
So when you put it to the test, it's a bit like what's been happening with us. We all just believe that they have the right to do what they do, and they believe, but when you put the test on them, they don't. So, but anyway, I don't know enough about the circumstances, but that's how I would approach it if I was a property owner.
Well, I suppose that all comes under the heading of what, we mentioned before about agriculture being under attack, because from what I can see, we're signed up with the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, all the stuff to do with net zero by 2050. We're seeing farmers being wiped out across the board, under a lot of these kind of things. So,
well, we're not signed up because it's an unsolicited entry, simply because they haven't asked the people. A government just can't go out and do what they think that they can freely do. Section 128, you take it to a referendum. Do the Australian people consent to entering the World Health Organization? Yes or no? Does the Australian people consent to, signing up on the Lima Agreement and giving everything to China like Whitlam did? Well, where have the people ever been asked? Because this is our asset, this is our country, and they are to govern us according to what we do and the law. And if we haven't been asked, then it's an invalid transaction. It's done without power. Same thing.
So we've done a few interesting interviews in the last few days, and I mean, it's from what you're saying, we're seeing many of the politicians allegedly just sitting by and watching laws be broken, the sections of the Constitution just be bypassed or disregarded. So I wanted to talk a bit about what's happening with some of the parties who are supposedly had deals where they're going to, look after preferences, and now they've gone back and they're preferencing the four majors or whatever. And also, we wanted to touch on your candidate for Queensland, old Billy Bay. But I just wanted to ask, what's your take on, if so many of these breaches of the Constitution are happening, then what's happening with the politicians? Why are they just allowing this to happen? And who's supposed to be looking after this and making sure it doesn't happen? Surely the government knows that they're breaking the law. So how does this happen, and what can we do about that?
Well, first of all, no one's breaking the law in Australia, Wade, because they're not operating under our law. Our founding deed is the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1900. It's a British Act, and it came into force at Federation in 1901. That's a fact. That's their paramount cornerstone. That is the title deeds to our country. If you do not operate under that law through the executive power, through the Westminster system and the executive power of the Queen or the King of the United Kingdom, because it's a concept that we've adopted, and you go in and operate under an artificial Queen, then you're not operating under law. So currently, everything is operating outside the 3 tiers of government. Who is putting us and contributing to this basically counterfeit is the Australian people themselves. Because when you go to the ballot box, you tell your viewers to have a look whether or not that the individual, like let's just talk about Rick Wilson in our area. He's the member for O'Connor. He's out there, and if you look at how he spells his name, it's not in English, it's in all caps. So, you know, everyone knows when you go to court, you got to have, if you're a corporation, you got to have the ACN number, Australian company number, and you must write in all caps. Otherwise, the court does not file it. When you go on an alleged criminal charge, they put your name in all caps because that is the jurisdiction of commerce that recognises. So when you drive down the highway, keep left, you know, roadworks ahead, bridge ahead, slow down, reduce speed, all in all caps. But when you see the big signs when you're coming along to Sydney, Adelaide, Melbourne, it's all written in English. So we are the ones that are going along with this alternative administration that only would ever best give you rights and not, privileges and avoid you of your rights. That's why we can't get access to the royalties of this country. How do I know this? Because the law clearly explained it to me as a federal senator. And that's how I got a lot of people home through the alleged pandemic, because we're one self-governing colony. There can be no internal borders. So you can't place a prohibition out on a political limitation to prevent people travelling throughout this self-governing colony. Our borders went 12 nautical miles out to sea. Now, that's Blind Freddy doesn't have to tell you that, but if you consent that there's a border in the middle, if anyone's seen Blazing Saddles, get and have a look at Blazing Saddles, where they're chasing the bandits across the terrain, and they come out in the middle of nowhere, and they've got this toll booth, and the bandits ride around the toll booth, and the sheriff and all the law enforcers pull up and say, "Oh shit, have you got a dime?" So the bloody thing goes up. That's exactly what's happening in Australia. So what we got to do is get people that are going to go in that actually do their job as a federal senator, because that's the constitutional duty of a federal senator, is to make sure the laws of the Commonwealth are upheld and the states are compliant. The West Australian state is not compliant to the laws, never has been, certainly since 1986 under the Australia Act, and they don't overcome the prohibitions of our own WA Constitution at 2.2 and 2.3 of that Act. And it clearly states if it ain't passed in Her Majesty's rightful title of the United Kingdom, because that's the executive power, it's void at law. Anyway, again, I'm not making the claim. That is what I learnt as a federal senator. So we have to have faith in someone that actually knows how to present and pitch the rights back to the Australian government. We need to go in for the purpose of getting out. We know it's a jurisdiction that is not under our law, but I mean, how else do you fix it? You've got to go in there. It's a bit like sending in a SWAT team to get control and come out and deal with it, then beat them at their own game, because you're not going to. You can be the best footballer, but if they don't let you on the field, or you're kicking goals outside the boundary line, they're not going to put it on the scoreboard. So we've got to go in for the purpose of getting out. And that is the remedy at this stage, bearing in mind there are avenues, although Britain at the moment, or the United Kingdom, I'm talking to a lot of politicians over there, and they agree with me outright on what's happening. So if they're re-elected, we may have a passage to be able to address it there. But look, we need to understand and deal with our own affairs back here in Australia. And say no. Say no. I mean, everyone said no at the last referendum, although it wasn't a referendum, but we said no. And what we want to say is no, you're not shutting down live sheep trade. No, you're not going to digital titles on our land titles. No, you're not going to keep executing and throwing people out of their private homes. And no, you're not going to take all the royalties from our extractable industries and primary industry and gas and coal and so forth. We want the benefits of our assets, and that's what we need to do.
So I think it'd be a good time right now to you've got a a documentary that you made a little while ago, about approximately 45 minutes, and I think it explains a lot of the sort of stuff that you're talking about now. So would you like to, before we go on to a couple other things, if you've got time, we're almost up to an hour or so, but if you've got a bit of time, I'd like to look at the other couple of things I was talking about. Would you like to give a bit of a plug for that and let people know what your documentary is about and where people can find it and see it? Because I think it gives a hell of a lot of great information as to many of the things you're talking about, and I think it's something that every Australian should actually watch.
Yeah, look, it was a documentary that I needed to put together. You know, I'm not getting any younger. I've got a family, and I've spent 10 years, I guess, or certainly near on 10 years, trying to inform the public. And if you notice, none of my material ever gets banned from Facebook because, and certainly disinformation and misinformation, I haven't seen anything ever removed from my public platforms. So, because I don't make the claim, the law makes the claim. So it was important that I shared my knowledge in a documentary so that I could make it palatable to the Australian people, more understandable, because I know I get to tend to talk legal because I'm always sort of in that legal side. But yeah, and it's something I was invited to do, and I accepted it, and I felt like it needed to happen. So I've done it, and I've nailed my flag to the mast. And in the event that, depending on how I feel after this election, I'm seriously thinking of, calling it a day, because I'm just not going to continue to push a tire with flat push a car with flat tires.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to do that, or try and push start a car with no fuel in the tank. You know, the Australian people have a duty and have an honour and an obligation to their Anzacs that went and sacrificed their lives for the freedoms we live today. Although we're not living those freedoms, life was a lot better in Australia. And if you can see over the decades, we've slowly had more and more rights, and the critical mass applying to everyday living. I mean, who can afford
Yeah.
fuel?
Yeah.
Who can afford the food prices? Who can afford getting not much money at the farm gate for their livestock? You know, the whole thing's unbalanced, and there's no constitutional safeguard given to the people of Australia at this stage. So I needed to make that very clear, and to tell people that the Commonwealth Parliament is the one down the hill. And if you look at it now, it's got mode on it, which is Museum of Australian Democracy. No Australians kicking back other than myself. So we would then lose democracy. And if you're losing democracy, like become a museum of democracy, there is a public notice going out that you do not have democratic process or power that are no longer in this country. So this is the notice that they put out there. You acquiesce your rights, then all of a sudden you've lost everything. We are going to lose Australia. There is no question. We've nearly lost it now. And I call it Little China. We have a lot of infiltration in the parliament, but it's not our real parliament. So it's now up to the people. I've told everyone in layman terms in a documentary, here it is. Well, you suck it, you see it, you digest it, what you want to do after that. Because I tell you what, the burden and the conscience is clearly off my shoulders, and I can walk out of this coach now and get on with my life and make some money, because I just cannot keep doing this if the people in Australia are going to continue to be apathetic, continue to abuse me. Not that I take offence to that, because there are trolls, but don't listen. Well, sorry, I'm not going to keep yelling down an echo chamber. I've done my role, constitutional sworn duties as a federal senator for West Australia, and now that documentary is reverberating and getting major parties leaders to say, we didn't know this. Well, sorry, that you do now, so start dealing with it. So look, it's out there. In layman terms, the pollywaffle's in the pool. So they need to deal with the elephant in the room. And that's not only just outside of Parliament. If Craig Kelly gets in there, his level of thinking starting to change. Jared Rennick's level of thinking starting to change. And look, my media release going out to Cairns News about what we're doing here in West Australia over property rights is now going to be taken up with Bob Catter. And I know Bob very well. And I think Bob's going to support us very well. And he's going to be very proud of what we've been able to achieve.
Well, I think that's the sort of stuff that, you know, people should be taking notice of, and you should be seeing in schools. Like, this kind of stuff is our actual history, Rod. This is the real thing that we're dealing with, and the crap that kids are indoctrinated with schools, and also the same half-baked crap they're indoctrinated with in universities. But just if somebody wants to see your documentary, exactly where do they find it?
They can go on to Great Australian Party website, or they can go on Great Australian Party Facebook and download the documentary. And can I say this?
So
GAP's policies are to teach the Constitution in the curriculum, because if our children aren't taught their rights, well, then how would they ever know that their rights have been taken away from them? So we need to give them, and rightly so, that's what makes them Australian. That's their founding deeds, that's their rights, and that's their protection.
Precisely. I couldn't agree 100 any more than that.
Can I say this, Wade? It's as simple as this in layman terms, right? Let's get real simple. You can't go fishing without a fish hook. You can't run a government without a constitution. It's as simple as that.
So and look, this is once more, you know, you hear a lot of the candidates talk, and particularly from the majors and all that sort of thing. They talk a lot about cost of living. They talk about the economy. They talk about we've got to get to net zero, climate change, and all this stuff. But there's some basic fundamentals that if you don't understand that from the word go, then you're in trouble. And, you know, you can brush across the top with other things all you want. But, you know, if you're looking at something that is a fundamental threat to your very existence, and, you know, that needs to be addressed and looked at. We did an interview with Derek Bolak the other day.
Not interested in going anywhere. I don't need to. I consider him to be a pest, making very unfounded claims over social media. I may have met him once in Melbourne, but not long enough to know him well. I really not interested in what you may or may not have to say about that individual.
Yep.
So move on that one.
All right. Well, what we're trying to do with this whole election situation is just give a whole different range of views and opinions and so on. Give everybody an opportunity to, you know, say their piece, and give the people of Australia as much information, because similarly there'd be people that says, oh, Culleton's just a nutter and a crackpot and blah blah blah. So, you know, I think we're trying to do what we can to cover as many bases. Well,
can I make this claim? My wife is a psychologist, and the last assessment she did on me, she said I was a machine, a well-oiled machine. So, you know, to come out and say that I'm a nutter when we're actually getting results, we don't talk about it. We actually put it into action, and we're getting results. That's not a nutter.
Which is exactly what I said a bit earlier on. You know, this is why I asked you about things where you are getting results. And make no mistake, they call me a crackpot and a loony and a nutter and the whole thing too. You know, but we're educating a lot of people. We're making a lot of people have a look at things that are generally brushed under the carpet. So, you know, there's, I think that the work that you do and that we do at Billboard Battalion here, you know, this is critically important stuff. So, I mean, there's always people who have a crack at it.
We got to keep family farmers farming. The best environmentalists in this country are the landowners. The best primary producers in this country are Australian farmers. Australian farmers have never let the people of Australia down, never let the people internationally down. They've always kept our supermarket shelves stocked with fresh meat and produce. why would we ever want to get rid of our bona fide Australian family farmers?
And look, this is one of the things that I've been fighting for years and years, as were my parents, on the same sort of thing. But we do see the government policy is costing family farmers their business and their farms and their livelihood and their career every day.
Every attempt by the Labor government and the major parties, we've circumvented. We got rid of the Aboriginal Culture Heritage Act here in WA. We forced the Premier to come and apologise. We've had a whole heap of meetings outside the West Australian Parliament. We were told to get a permit, and the police said, you're not coming here unless you're getting a permit. And I'd say to the police, well, why would I need a permit? And they say, well, you do. And I said, that's permission off the licensor, I guess, off the authorised person. They said yes, and I said, well, I'm a taxpayer. I pay for the running of this joint, and I own it, so I've just consented, and I give myself authorisation to come here. And once I say that to the police, we all go and do our gatherings outside our asset, on the steps of our asset, and we're never ever interfered by the police. So I've never had to obtain a permit. And yet when it's the West Australian Farmers Federation, Pastorals and Graziers Association, they have to go and get a permit, because in actual fact, they are a corporation. They're just a nonsense entity and have no bearing on anything other than a mouthpiece. So this is the understanding of the Australian farmer and people that we have to do. And that's what I'm prepared to do. And that's what this documentary alludes to.
Beautiful. So you've got a few candidates running. You've got some in WA, you've got some in New South Wales, you've got some in Queensland. How's all that going, in so much as, a fair few people are aware that Billy Bay's done a few strange things that we're not normally used to seeing in politics. Is there anything you might want to comment on there to give people a bit of clarity on that, Rod?
Okay, well, first of all, we're not running anyone in New South Wales. We're running in Western Australia for the Senate and one lower house seat for Hasluck. We're not running in Victoria, although we're asking our GAP followers to support Dr. Neil, I think it is, for Jared Rennick. And Queensland, we have William Bay. Look, over the last 48 hours, I have been informed that William Bay took it upon himself to make an announcement that he would place Jared Rennick number 1 and GAP number 2. Now, as far as I'm concerned, William Bay, we select candidates. He is a man that's up for the job. He's inspired me with the efforts that he's taken. There's no question about that. And anyone who goes in and challenges, APRA or any of the, the government bodies, I suppose, to me, is an Australian, because they're having a crack. Australia's about having a go. Yep. But look, sometimes people's, that they become very, they get pumped up. It's a bit like a footy game, and they get very passionate. And William Bay is a very passionate Christian fellow, and that's what I like about him. And look, sometimes they do things, and look, he's had no political experience, and he has come out. Now, that is a decision he's made. That is not a delegate decision by the Great Australian Party. And to give William Bay, it was always going to be a good challenge for a good candidate in Queensland. And I work very closely with Michael O'Neill, used to be with IMOP and now the Heart Party. And it was we agreed that we'd go a joint ticket for William Bay, put the Heart Party number 2. And I commend Michael O'Neill for that. However, no consultation was given to, Michael O'Neill, and certainly not to me. And I can tell you for the record, the how to vote cards have gone up, which are authorised by myself. have been done in consultation with Michael O'Neill from the Hart Party, and, you know, at large done with William Bay, although William Bay has gone off on his own beliefs, which he believes it's one that's come from higher powers, and pretty much shot from the hip without the proper due process. So, and I understand he's been contacted by the AEC. Well, I'm not going to interfere with what he believes to be, and that could be on his social platform. But how to vote cards for Queensland, the ones that people should be paying attention to, which have been scrutinised, which have been put through our preference people that have been doing it for many years, so that, you know, we do support Gerard Rennick, and we want to make sure that Gerard Rennick gets the capture of the primary vote for Great Australian Party. And it has been authorised by myself in conjunction with Michael O'Neill. It's been endorsed by myself as the authorised officer. We're asking people in Queensland to put 1 for Great Australian Party, for the upper house, 2 for Gerard Rennick. That is going to, if William doesn't succeed on a joint ticket, it's our best pitch for number 2, which is Gerard Rennick. Can't be much more upfront than that. And I apologise. William has actually sent me an apology, and I accept that. You know, like I say, people's passions get the better of them sometimes. They think that they're doing the right thing without proper understanding of the requirements under the Electoral Act. But we weren't going to bring the party into disrepute. I just needed him to have his little moment, and I knew that the AEC would be swarming. There's no two ways about it. Anything that GAP's put out of line, they come pretty quick. They're monitoring what we're doing. But in actual fact, that's a good thing, because it's pulled him into line. It's made him keep on track. And, you know, it's not easy out there campaigning. The pressure's on. You know, it's tireless work. And sometimes you do make a mistake, and your best intentions, you think you're doing the right thing. But when you really apply it under policy and under law, those best intentions can come undone. So he's acknowledged that. We're on with business. And and we're not prepared to run on a belief. We run on fact, what is going to get the best results for our members of Queensland and the electors in the state of Queensland.
Yep, yeah, beautiful. So, I mean, it must be hard at times when, you know, you don't have the same resources as the party machine, and the same years and years and years of people coming through the ranks and so on. So, you know, and I think people need to understand that, you know, you're the same as some of the other people we've done interviews with and talked to, you know, just true blue Aussie people who, this is not your normal kind of thing, and you're stepping up to the plate, you know. So nobody expects things to be perfect, and I think we need to be able to give a little bit of room and a little bit of grace for people who are there because they care about the country.
Absolutely.
They care about the people.
Look, many a times I've brought a juvenile pup into the sheep yards, and, you know, the first thing they do is they run in and throw the sheep over the fence, and because they just don't have the experience. So a bit gun-ho.
Yep.
But then once you start to navigate them through and get an understanding, and just say, look, this is how it works. You know, I've had plenty of sheepdogs that have been the best, you know, threw them over the fence on the first run, that have been absolutely amazing in the sheep yards, you know, for many years. And that's all it is. It's just coming down to political experience. You know, and sometimes, you know, being a party leader on a federal level, you know, you're trying to deal with things interstate, which we're a long way away. I try to give a lot of leniency to my candidates, that they go out and do the right thing and listen to their constituents. And that's what I said to William. Look, you know, if I was to go and do a live stream and ask the question, you know, getting you know, a lot wider audience, and he said, no, don't do that. And rightly so, because, you know, why don't I just come out for the West Australian election and say, hey, everyone, put Labor 1 and then put me number 2 on the Senate for West Australia. It doesn't work like that. We've got to put us 1, who we want to come in second, do what we do best for the primary vote, and make sure that those votes aren't lost and exhausted. And that's what we've done. We've just corrected it. And like I said, that was William's belief on the day, who believed he was given the right sign to do it. But unfortunately, when we apply, it has to go through the pressure test, and it didn't perform. So no offence taken.
Yep.
And and don't be disrespectful to him, that he just believed he was doing the right thing.
As I think many of the people who are new to this stuff, Rod, some people are going to make mistakes. I know that Craig Kelly had some problems there a fair while ago over the idiotic thing from the AEC about the size of a piece of lettering on one of the corflutes. I mean, so this is how bad it is, I think, with the AEC, that small parties and independents who actually are just ordinary, decent Australians doing the right thing. I think they cop it from the AEC, whereas the major parties get away with pretty well whatever they want to do. So I think well done to you and all the sort of people like you, just average Aussies who are having to go to try and fight for our country. So I just wanted to touch base on, and I'm talking about this of everybody. You may or may not be aware across at the international health regulations, whether that's on your radar or anything like that, whether you know much about it.
We oppose it all. We don't need to be governed. We need to look after our own affairs and our sanitisation within our domestic shores. That's as simple as that. And certainly take on, adhere to what might be happening around the rest of the world. But we've got the expertise, if we apply the right expertise without any political, interference. I'm sure we've got plenty of good doctors and good medical health scientists in this country that can all come together, good or bad. And William's a very good practitioner as well. And Paul Oosterhouse and so forth, and I think it's Mimi Lee, is it? My Lee. And look, these are great practitioners that have a very common sense and a good approach to what needs to happen. So we don't need to be governed by the rest of the world. We're sovereign, and we need to just keep ploughing ahead on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you're successful and other people in your party are successful, then I hope that you hold the rest of the parliaments to account on this kind of stuff. Look, there's a hell of a lot of work for and your people to do, Rod, and it's good to see people who are not just being part of groups or organisations, but are putting their name there. They're putting their neck on the line. So, we've been going now for nearly an hour and a half. So you probably, if there's anything else that you wanted to say just to finish up with, I'm glad to hear that. Otherwise, we'll just say a very big thank you to you for your time. Hopefully the league isn't too much pain sitting there talking, for this long. But I think it's been a great interview, and I think that, this is not what you get from your normal mainstream 4 major party politicians. You don't get some bloke turned up in a suit and talking all their gibberish crap that no one can understand and no one cares about anyway. So, I think it's great to have a bloke like you, as many of our other people we've had on, do exactly the same thing. And that's why we're trying to give a platform to the smaller parties and the smaller people and the real Australians, not the polished career politicians.
Well, look, we're going to be out and about, and broken leg and all, right across. I wouldn't say right across the state of West Australia. I don't think I can get too far north, but certainly the southwest. We've only got a fortnight to go, so more constant pulling up in the major regional centres, putting out the signs, keep shipping sheep, because that is the correct message to put out there. Keep shipping sheep, and get the Australian farmers to realise and live stream, get on the beat, talk to homeless people, and certainly get get the comfort and warmth back to these people and get them back on track, because no one should be suffering. No children should be suffering. No children should be going to school hungry. And look, I know there are, certain drugs involved or whatever, but, not everyone's in that same boat. There are a lot of people that just want to go in this country. Our young guys coming up, our young generation coming up, need to be afforded the opportunity of having a go and really giving the opportunities. And that's bringing back manufacturing, getting away from China. We don't need to be manufacturing in China. We need to be doing this all. We need to bring back Holden. We need to bring back Ansett, so to speak. And we don't want to lose Qantas, and we don't want to lose our Anzac Day, and we want to respect our veterans. So, and we want to respect everyone in Australia. And that's what the ethos of GAP is. And you want your country back, vote GAP. And we've got the team to do it.
Well done. I think we're only a few days away from Anzac Day, Rod. So I think it's very appropriate to be mentioning that. And as people know, on our logos over here, that is an Anzac right there. So we are 100% on that page. We operate as best we can with the spirit of the Anzacs, as I know you do, mate. So look, thanks very much for your time tonight, Rod. I know there's a fair bit happening there, so just like to say how much we appreciate your efforts and what you've done in the past. So I think that's been terrific. And
keep watching this space. There's some good live streams coming out over the next couple of days. So go on to Great Australian Party Facebook. I live them up there, and certainly keep an eye on our website. And look, help support our campaign. Can't do it on fresh air, and that's the whole thing. But look, we can get the results in the upper house, which is the High Court of Parliament. We don't have to go into the hot house down there, which is all just hot air, and that's why it's green inside. It's that much condensation under the roof there. It's just all hot air and bullshit. We just need to worry about the lawmaking power, the House of Review, and review other laws that they claim that are taking the rights away from Australian people, and we can show that we can restore that, given the opportunity to do so.
All right. Well done, mate. And look, thanks again, Rod. So we might pull a pin at that, mate. And, keep on going, and well done. And, hopefully we'll see you with a spot in the big house there, mate.
Well, it's all up to the Australian people now.
All right. Thanks, Rod. We'll catch you later, mate.